Hey, y'all, Gary here with Tennessee Stands. So look, we are in it to win it now. The 2024 legislative session has convened today, and there was already some action that took place yesterday, and that's a little bit what I want to talk with you about today. So yesterday, the Rules Committee in the House met, potentially, well, not just one amendment. There were several amendments proposed to the House rules. In other words, the Constitution allows each chamber of our legislature to determine their own rules as to how they proceed throughout a session. One of the caveats that we talk about a lot is the difference between roll call votes and voice votes. So in the Senate, as a bill moves through the committee process, every time that bill is voted on, the Senate requires a roll call vote, which means you can go to the website at capitol.tn.gov and you can see the name of your elected senator, and you can see how they voted every time on every bill in every committee. Unfortunately, the House rules do not operate the same way. In committees in the House, they utilize what's called a voice vote, which means that's when the chairman says, everyone say aye, aye, all opposed say no, no, and then he hits the gavel, and then here's the thing, determines with his or her own ear as a chairman whether or not that bill passed or failed based on whether or not they determined that the yeses were louder or the noes were louder. Now, that doesn't always mean that chairmen have nefarious intent with the passage or failure of a bill, but it does mean that the potential is always there. So there's one thing that you need to know about how the House operates in committees. At the end of the day, technically, it is the chairman of the committee that passes or fails a bill. One person. Not a committee of 10, not a committee of 20. One person decides whether or not that bill moves forward. We don't believe that's appropriate in a state legislature when you're representing 7 million people across the state. There's another problem with the way the voice voting is structured. On the website, when you go to that same website, capitol.tn.gov, you can't necessarily see how your legislator voted. And I'll show you an example. But first, I want to play this clip. This is in committee yesterday. And I want to play this clip by Majority Leader, Representative William Lamberth. And he brings up this example of HB 405 about how the votes were calculated. Listen to this.
But I did happen to go ahead and look up the votes on House Bill 405. I know that's a bill that you had last year where there was a voice vote. And I found it interesting that the voice votes are recorded on the website. It indicates the yeses and the nos on who voted that way. But in the Senate, which has a roll call vote, it says votes for Senate Bill 452 by the Senate are not available. So the House is transparent on their voting.
Now, I'm going to show you the actual truth of this bill, right? Because again, we bring the receipts when we say something like this. I don't know where Representative Lamberth got this information, but he's dead wrong. By the way, this guy's an attorney. Sucks for those of you that he has to represent in court. But let me take you to the website. This is the bill he was referencing, HB 405, which Representative Richey ran, which, by the way, would have closed the primaries. We've talked about that a lot here on several of our channels about closing the primaries. We believe that only Republicans should be voting in Republican primaries, but that's not the way it works here in Tennessee. All right, here's HB 405. We're going to go to the Votes tab, and here's what he's referencing. He's referencing that there certainly are names listed on the House side as to how the votes were taken in committee, and he referenced in the Senate that the Senate votes were not available. Well, let me explain why that is. First off, there's nothing unique about the way the votes are recorded on this bill in committee. You can see in subcommittee, it lists the voice vote and it says the ayes prevail. So that's all you see. You don't get to necessarily see how your representative voted. All you know is that the ayes prevail. And in the full committee, the nays prevailed, so it failed in committee. And as typical, this is not unique. Representatives Doggett, Martin, Moon, Reedy, Rudd, and Stevens requested themselves to be recorded as voting yes instead of the prevailing no. So again, that's common. There's nothing unique. This does not show you who voted no. It only shows you who voted yes. Now, why in the Senate does it show that there are no votes available? Well, let's go to the bill history. It's because they never heard the bill in the Senate. This is such a ridiculous statement by Representative Lamberth. The bill was scheduled several times in committee. It was never heard, never brought up in committee, and then sent to die to General Subcommittee because it failed in the House. And I'll show you one more example. Again, so just to close the book on 405, I don't know who gave Representative Lamberth this information and what point he was trying to make. But there was nothing unique about how the votes were represented in committee on this bill in terms of the House. And the Senate did not have votes on the website because they never voted, because you guys killed the bill in the House using the voice vote procedure, which is exactly why we're advocating for roll call votes. But let me go back. I'm going to pull up HB 252 as an example, because I really want you guys to understand this. And let's go look at the votes. So this was a bill to protect homeschoolers, so that homeschool folks did not have to report their vaccination status to school. And why to public schools? Why should they? They're at home. Why do we need to know homeschool children's vaccination status? Anyway, fortunately, this bill passed. But let's take a look. You can see in the Senate, as the bill went through the Senate Education Committee, it got 7 yeses, 2 noes, and you can see the list of everyone who voted yes and the list of everyone who voted no. But in the House, all you get to see in the subcommittee and full committee side is the ayes prevail, or the ayes prevail, and in this case of the subcommittee, and 2 marked themselves as voting no. So now let me show you what you have to do. Okay, this is what Representative Lamberth is calling transparency. In this K through 12 subcommittee, all that we know for certain is that the yeses prevailed and that Haston and McKenzie requested themselves to be voting no. So what must you do now? You need to go to the K through 12 subcommittee, the committee it listed. And then, if you recall, Haston and McKenzie recorded themselves as a no to the clerk, which would lead you to believe that Bolso, Hurt, Slater, Stevens, Warner, White, and Richey all voted yes. And that's technically what you're led to believe by the way this is recorded by the clerk on the website. But here's the problem. Here's what you don't know, is whether or not Bolso, Hurt, Slater, Stevens, Warner, White, or Richey actually attended the subcommittee hearing. You don't actually know if they voted yes. And you really don't even know if they would have voted no, technically, just because they did not record themselves as voting no does not mean that they didn't vote no. They just did not let the clerk know. So of these 6 men, you have no way of I miscounted, 7 men. You have no way of knowing whether or not they actually voted yes, even though they're listed with the prevailing vote. And why is that important? I mean, in the most technical sense, shouldn't we all view that as a problem? If we can't, with 100% certainty, when we're talking about the passing of legislation in the State House, is it not prudent that we should be able to know beyond a shadow of a doubt whether or not our elected representative was, number 1, present, and number 2, what they actually voted? It seems to make so much sense. It makes sense to the voters, but somehow it doesn't make sense to the men sitting on the committee. So there was a question asked by Representative Andrew Farmer as to whether or not you and I can actually see how people voted on the website. Take a look at this.
Just to be very clear, every vote that's taken by a full committee or subcommittee, every vote that's taken, the public has the ability to go online and see the name of the person who voted yes, and the name of the member that voted yes, and the name of the member that voted no. Is that correct?
The way it's recorded is that the members of the committee are obviously online, and the presiding members, so if it will say, if the vote was a yes and the bill was successful, then it indicates that it was successful, and then it will indicate those that asked to be recorded as a no. And so it indicates on there. So it literally, you look at the number of the members of the committee, and you look at the number of no's, and it's a yes and a no, it's right there.
So the answer to Representative Farmer's question, by the way, is no. You cannot right now at any point in time go to the website and see on the House side names, like you can in the Senate, names right there as to who voted yes and who voted no. That does not exist. But what does representative and attorney, lawyer, boy, they're known for doing this, right? What does he do? How does Representative Lamberth answer the question? Well, he tap dances around it and explains to you the process that I just explained to you, but answers Farmer's question in the affirmative as if what he's saying actually is describing the fact that you can see their name next to the vote, but when you actually can't. And all they did this entire committee hearing is tap dance around the truth when the people are asking for something very, very simple: transparency. We want to see how you voted. Here's Representative Gary Hicks out of East Tennessee and what he had to say about it.
And I, too, have received some calls about this particular rule change. But, you know, if I'm sitting here and we're debating a bill and I don't open my mouth when it's time to vote, whether I open it or not, if I don't turn around to the clerk and say, hey, mark me as a yes or mark me as a no, I voted, because at that point I'm on the prevailing side. And so that's what I've told my constituents. If my name is on the prevailing side, I voted yes, whether I open my mouth or not, unless I turn around and tell that clerk, mark me as a no. So I think we have to remember that there's accountability there, and maybe we should do a little better job as legislators making sure that we get our constituents under the same understanding. I don't know, you know, if we were to do a roll call vote on every single bill, which I don't have a problem with transparency. That's why I come down here, and if somebody asks me how I vote, I'll tell them. I think there needs to be an understanding. Even if you sit here and you do not say a word and a vote is taken, you voted. One way or the other, you voted, because if you don't say anything, you're on the prevailing side. If you turn around and say, hey, mark me a no, you voted no. So I just want to make sure that's clear, especially back to my constituents back home. It's very transparent, whether we like it or not. It is transparent because our votes are being taken. And so that's all I want to say, and make sure the folks back home certainly know where I'm coming from.
So this guy puts out the idea that it makes all the sense in the world, and it should make sense to you as a voter, that as a representative, he doesn't have to do anything, and he voted. He doesn't have to say anything, and he voted. He doesn't even have to let you know whether or not he was in committee, and he voted. Why? Because he didn't let the clerk know that he voted opposite of the prevailing votes. Therefore, in his silence, he represented you. And in his silence, as he sat there saying nothing and doing nothing, he represented you, the people that sent him to Nashville to represent you on these measures as they go through committee. I mean, look, it's incredible to me that this was actually said on the public record with a straight face. I mean, essentially, Gary Hicks is letting all of his constituents know that he's perfectly fine sitting in a committee hearing, saying and doing absolutely nothing while pretending he's doing something. Sir, if you're not speaking up, if you're not pushing a button, if you're not saying aye or no, you're not voting. You're not representing your people. It's just that simple. It doesn't matter that the clerk recorded something as if you took some sort of action. The fact is, you did not. And so by demanding a roll call vote, what voters are wanting from you is an affirmative action. We want to know that, number one, you were even present in the committee hearing. But number two, we want to know with certainty, sir, whether or not you voted yes or no to a particular bill. It's really simple. But the fact is, all you guys did for an hour was tap dance around all of these issues when the people are asking you for something very simple. We want to know how you're representing us. We want to know how you're voting. Okay? Last thing, I'll leave you with this clip. At the beginning of the hearing on the rule amendment, Representative Lamberth is promised the right word, suggested that he was going to have a roll call vote on this particular amendment. They had done voice votes for everything else, and he's like, but on this one, it makes sense. I'll go ahead and do a roll call vote, but then takes a voice vote. Watch this.
By the way, I will tell you, in the discretion of the chair, we are going to take a roll call vote on this today. I thought that would be appropriate. All right, seeing none, we'll be voting on this particular rule. It's an amendment to Rule 83 by Representative Richey. All in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, nay. Remember, the nays have it.
Look, quite simply, starting out right now in 2024, the House had an opportunity to choose transparency, to choose accountability. And by the way, this is nothing new. Voters have been asking for this for years in terms of the House and this voice voting procedure through committees. They had an opportunity to fix that. They chose not to. They chose the veil. Once again, they chose the mask. They chose corruption, in my opinion. Again, as I stated earlier, everything's not always nefarious. However, you can't deny that the voice vote process allows bills to be expediently killed by chairmen under the threat of leadership or special interest or whoever it might be. Then by de facto, the Senate never even has to hear the bill. And no one even has to vote on the bill. Do you understand, right, that whenever a chairman kills a bill in committee in the House, that means that bill never even got a roll call vote at all in the Senate or the House? It was literally never heard, never brought up for a roll call vote. There's never any legislator's name that is directly tied to a yes or no vote to that bill. They can deny it all they want, but we know that's the process. This is how voice votes are used. We simply want transparency. We want to know at every turn how a legislator votes on a bill. We asked for it, we got denied, and there you go. So